For $50, I bought a wrecked scooter with a bent frame. It was a good deal. This video is my attempt to refurbish that scooter into something that functions once again and is something fun. Not that all scooters aren't fun, but this one aims to be unique. So let's see if I can put this scooter frame back together, and also let's see if at the end of the video, you can tell me what this scooter is gonna look like. All right, so our next question is on the front, the head tube here. Clearly this is bent right there. You can see that gap and that bend there. But the question at this point is, can we salvage anything in here? Is this head tube salvageable? I would like to salvage that. The steering stem inside this head tube, is that salvageable? Can we make use of that in any way? All right, so to do that, I'm gonna start taking this guy apart. Now our attention turns to this guy. Can we reuse this stem? It's very clearly bent down here where it meets up with our top clamp here. The rest of it though, I think I might be able to salvage this if I cut it down here, so I can visually see where it bends. Mark that. Oh, look at that. It's not a solid rod. I thought it would be a solid rod for some reason. All right, then to assess the straightness of our head tube here, I'm really concerned if like this is tilted at all, and so I'm going to pull a tape on either side here and see if the measurements are the same. 11 and 13/16, and then I get 11 and 13/16 on this side as well. As far as I can tell, it's straight. All right, so I think we'll be able to reuse our head tube. I want to cut this away from the rest of this frame here, get this all cleaned up so I just have the tube itself. And then later I want to go ahead and get this down tube, cut that thing out, and then I'm thinking about cutting this stuff back into here. All right, so here we are. I've ground off all the stuff from that down tube. I'm not sure if I'm going to modify this tube or not, if I'm gonna shorten this. That's a possibility as well. So we'll see, but for right now, this is it. We'll put that aside. All right, so I'm currently contemplating shortening this steering neck here because my body work and stuff is going to be somewhere around in here. I'm gonna have like almost 6 inches sticking up above the body work, which is kind of obscene looking. I'm definitely gonna nip this part here off. Remove that, and then maybe we'll take a little section like that out of here. All right, so we're marking out our cuts here. I'm gonna use this receipt from our threaded rod as a little miniature pipe wrap. I'm gonna use this to get my line straight all around. I can go ahead and mark this all the way around. We should have a nice straight level cut. Just like that. So I'm gonna get this little section right here. All right, so I've got my tubes, both of them cleaned up. I've got them cleaned up on the inside and the outside. I've got my little bevel on there. And this is because I'm gonna TIG weld this thing, and so I have to have clean metal all the way on the inside as well. Otherwise, I'll get contamination and little porosity and whatnot in my weld, and we don't want that. We want a nice solid weld. So, got that, and I'm getting it set up in my vise here, clamp the one side down here, and now we gotta get this side in here and clamp this down, and then we'll be able to weld that seam up right there. All right, so looking at the rest of this guy, obviously we're getting rid of this down tube, what's left of that, and that comes down into here, and there's this other cross brace that it welds to, and then it's reinforced up here. I want to shorten this frame anyways. I want to shorten this whole section down. That brings us to this guy here. You can see there's all sorts of stuff. The kickstand, little kickstand sensor, all that stuff is up in this section here, and there's some reinforcements as well I'm thinking about cutting this right there at the end of the reinforcement and continuing that cut across there. All right, so I'm having a little bit of a conundrum right now because if we look at our front end, this guy over here, this is from here to the end of this tire is like 25 inches. So that is pretty big, man. That's gonna increase the length of the scooter quite a bit, which is not what I like. I like the compactness of the scooters in general. That's kind of what makes them fun. It's also going to change our handling because our handling is then not gonna be quite as quick as your typical scooter, which is also kind of what makes scooters fun. But we really like this front end, so we want to do that. Now we gotta start taking this thing all apart, get all the wiring and everything off of it, so we're just down to the frame. All right, with wires and hoses disconnected from the engine and the frame, we now turn our attention to removing the engine, and we go down here. I believe this is our axle bolt, functional axle bolt. There's one on either side, and I think if I remove that, the whole engine and everything should sort of drop out of here. So let's see if I'm right. I've never taken a scooter apart before, so this is an interesting thing for me. Whole new journey in life. I don't even understand how this bolt works. Push through somehow? I don't understand. Oh, yeah, it works. Can we separate the frame now? Yes. Ah, check it out. Awesome. All right. We did something. And that's everything that makes it go. That suspension, engine, and wheel drive, everything all in one. This is like a propulsion unit. How neat is that? I just rolled the propulsion unit out of the way. Now I've capped those ends. So we've got just this little nubby thing going on here. All right, so we've got some 1.25" tubing here in diameter, and it's a 14 gauge wall. I'm gonna use this to start making our frame, to build onto our frame for our scooter. So I'm gonna start doing that by putting it in our roller, and we're going to roll this sucker. One of the reasons I've chosen a 14 gauge wall, on the Grom Reaper we did 120 wall, or that's closer to like 1/8 inch wall. 0.12 is what we prefer to as 120 wall. 1/8 inch is 0.125 is 1/8 inch. This is like 0.83, something like that. It's just under a step down from 1/8 inch. The main reason I chose this tubing to utilize this is because that's what's on the scooter now is 14 gauge. It's also what's on the stock Grom is 14 gauge. We way overbuilt the Grom Reaper. That is the strongest frame ever on a Grom. And so the advantage of the 14 gauge is that it's less metal, it's lighter. There we go. And here we are, we got two. Haha. And they are pretty much exactly the same. All right, so I'm breaking out the frame jig here. We got our legs for it. We're gonna start getting this thing set up. All right, so I've got this section of the frame level. This is the key part. This is where the swing arm goes on this bike. And I'm tying into that on this frame because it's really the only spot. So now we can start planning the front end. All right, now I've got all kinds of measuring devices. I've got my little angle finder here. I've got a level here. I've got another straight edge square. I'm trying to sort out everything, make sure it's where I want it to be. This is a digital angle finder. It works awesome for this sort of stuff. I need an angle here on my frame. I need this angle here on the steering stem, or the steering neck. If you're interested in seeing how I put this frame jig together, I'll put a link in the description of the video and how I made this guy. Let's see if this fits better now. All right, that is more like it. To simplify frame building like way too much, I'm gonna say something stupid like all that matters is making sure your steering neck is in alignment with your rear axle. And that's kind of my goal here. So we still need to set the height of this guy here, of the steering neck. Where is that gonna set? And that comes down to the front end that we've already made. So how is that gonna line up? I gotta figure that stuff out next. All right, so I've got the steering neck on there. Here's our front end. And the front end literally is going to be this close to the frame, like right in here. Our actual frame that needs to connect is going to come in like this, approximately like that. I think this will work. This is gonna get cut off here at some point. I'm gonna weld another plate on top of there that connects to our steering stem and then goes up to our steering neck. Connect this frame part, that's our next step. So this morning I am readdressing this. I'm having to adjust my rake. I realized that because my wheel is out so far. We need more of a rake. We need to lean this thing back a little bit. We need to have the rake has to come out in front of the little tire, where the tire hits the ground, this patch, this contact patch here on the bottom of the tire where it's hitting the ground. The steering stem, this angle, the rake, it needs to hit in front of that. That is what keeps the bike steering straight. If you let go of the handlebars, the bike runs in a straight line in front of you. It's because the steering virtually goes in front of the wheel pad, or the contact patch there. All right, so by lining my wheel up on here, I have marked on my frame jig where my contact patch is for the tire. So the very bottom of the tire, where that contacts, the center of that, marked there. And then I've also marked where the steering axis, where that contact patch is, by putting a tube, sort of lining this tube up with my steering neck and bringing this down. I figure out where that lines up. And so these are way too close, because this measurement, this is like an inch apart, so too close. When the tire turns like this, it'll move this, the contact patch will potentially move up in front of, or in alignment with the steering axis point here, and so it won't create a caster effect, which is what brings the wheel back and in alignment, keeps it in alignment like this. We need to adjust our rake so that this guy will move up further. So I need to create a steeper angle on my rake. So we're gonna go back up here and we're gonna steepen this angle just a little bit, maybe like a degree. This is an unusual front end, and so we're gonna have, this is more of an extreme angle we're gonna end up on this thing than we normally would. It's just an artifact of doing odd things. All the things have to be odd. It can't just be an odd front end. It also has to be an odd frame setup. And rake is at about 61, which gives us about 29 degrees of rake-ish. I'm gonna move this back closer to 30. All right, now I'm gonna use my little pole here, my tube, to align, see where my steering axis contact patch is, if that has changed significantly or not. All right, so it has changed. So now we have a measurement of, it's over about 2¼ inches is where we're at now. You want to be basically 2 to 4 inches is kind of the ideal spot. At least this is according to Tony Foley, which is the book I'm going off of. I'll put a link in the description to that. This is very important in frame building. You can end up with situations where you get a high-speed wobble on this, and that's extremely dangerous. Luckily there's a range in there that 2 to 4 inches is pretty significant. Also, the frame is going to only have a part from here that goes to the head tube up here. So I'm working on coping that right now. So that's going to be this piece here. So I'm going to go ahead and cope the end of this, or fish mouth it. All right, so then my fit up is something like this. So then on the other end, I want it to come in somewhere up here near the top. Mark this, cut it, cope it, and we should be good. All right, so after a bit of fine tuning, we have now got this guy, which locks in very nicely. And the fit up is quite nice on it as well. And when I first started looking at coping stuff, of course, you have to look at the ones that have the hole saw, and there's like tools, special tools, just little fixtures you can buy and everything just for this. And then I came across some video or something, showed you how to cope it like this, and I was like, and I tried it out and I'm like, man, I'm very happy with the results on this. You can get exactly what you need this way. I'm gonna go ahead and tack this tube in now. All right, so now we've got this top tube welded on and it's looking good. And now it's time to move on to our down tube version of things, which are this guy. And I have two of these, one on each side. So I gotta start cutting this and getting it fit up to our head tube here and then down to our frame. All right, I'm gonna start out by cutting this end and then we'll measure and figure out on the other end where we have to cut it. I'm gonna mark it on top and on bottom where it contacts this head tube to make our cope. All right, so we got our fit up here, nice and roughly set in here where it's pretty close. And now I gotta get the bottom part here next. I want it to actually come out the side here. So I'm gonna cut this so it meets up like that next. So I'm very much making this up as I go along. This is much more of an art than a science because I don't have exact cuts here or exact measurements. I'm just sort of fitting it up little by little and making very conservative, longer cuts. And then as I work it closer to where I want it, I'll shorten these tubes up. All right, so there it is. There's our frame, everybody. We've got, I think you might call it the dream catcher. This is just barely tacked in there, but this is the general idea, so you get it. We need to finish welding this thing, and then we need to do the headset, the steering stem, figure all that stuff out. So on this guy here, we're gonna end up having to chop this thing here and make like a steering stem, and then put this onto our newly crafted frame. Well, I hope you figured out what the scooter is going to look like, because I'm not going to tell you. Since the scooter is obviously going to be odd looking, my girlfriend thought it would be fun to wait to reveal the scooter until it's finished. And I thought, sure, why not? Haven't done that before. So you will not see it again until it is on the streets and running. I know, this is a real cliffhanger, this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.